Okay, so we're back to triangles, and in this video we're going to talk about classifying triangles. And typically we classify triangles in two ways. We can classify them by their sides, and we also classify them by their angles. So one triangle usually has two different classifications. We're going to start by talking about the three different classifications of triangles based on their sides. You probably know this, but it's a good refresher just in case. Okay. All right. If triangle has three congruent sides, it's called equilateral. Okay, so it kind of looks like this, and we would mark it so that you can tell that they're all the same size. We can mark it with congruence markings, or we might just give measurements all the way around that are the same, but either way, we would consider this an equilateral triangle. Okay, if a triangle has two congruent sides, then we call it an isosceles triangle. And an isosceles triangle, the two sides that are congruent, first let's mark them. Those are called the legs, okay? And it kind of, when you've got a triangle that looks like this, they kind of look like legs. But any kind of isosceles triangle, the two congruent sides are called legs. So let's label that. We're going to say that this is okay, and then the remaining side we call the base, the side that is not congruent. Okay, and then the last type of triangle is considered a scalene triangle. It's a triangle with zero congruent sides, which means all three sides are different lengths. So a scalene triangle has all three sides that are different lengths, so nothing that's congruent. Okay, so remember, we can also classify triangles by their angles. All right, and so there are four different classifications, and there's actually 3 plus 1. Okay, these three will all be different, and then this one is actually a subset of one of the other ones. So if you have one obtuse angle, and here's a trick question: can you make a triangle with two obtuse angles? See if you can put that together in your head. The answer is no, you can't. Okay, because if you think about an obtuse angle, okay, there's only one way to make the triangle, right? And if you've got an one obtuse angle, this is considered an obtuse triangle. Okay, similarly, if you have one right angle, oh, there's a right angle. How many ways can I make a triangle then? So you can't have more than one right angle either, okay? If you have more than one right angle, you're not gonna have a triangle. So there's that. All right, so if you have one right angle, then it's considered to be a right triangle. Oh, well, we've got all kinds of fun stuff that we can do with those. Okay, but let's also talk about then the names of the parts of this, because this one has different parts as well. Remember that the side opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse. And then the sides that form the right angle are called legs. Okay, and they can be the same length or different, but they're called legs. All right, then we have a triangle that has three acute angles. Now, do those angles have to be the same measurement? Not at all. They just have to be less than 90 degrees. There's a nice little acute angle. Isn't it cute? Yeah, so all three sides have got to be less than 90 degrees, and that makes it an acute angle. All right, and then the last one is really a subset of an acute. All right, this last one is actually a subset of an acute triangle. This is a triangle that has all congruent angles, and we just call that equiangular. And it looks an awful lot like one that we already talked about. Okay, so if all the angles are congruent, it kind of looks like this. Does that look like a yield sign to you? That would be an equiangular triangle. All right, and all three angles are congruent, and we just call that equiangular. So here's a question for you. Are all equiangular triangles equilateral too? A thought question. See what you think. All right, let's take a second and try a couple of examples. All right, now it's important that you don't assume anything that you can't derive from a drawing. So if a side looks like it might be congruent to another side, or an angle looks like it might be a right angle, unless it's marked that way, don't make the assumption. All right, so let's take a look at these and classify them by both side and angle. So in this case, we have 3 congruent sides, and we know that all of these angles are less than 90 degrees. So we can call that an acute equilateral triangle. We can also call it an equiangular equilateral triangle, okay? Because it is true, all equilateral triangles are also equiangular. Does make sense, right? Next, how about this one? All right, think about the angles. Are they all 3 acute? Hopefully you notice that this one is not. It's an obtuse triangle, all right, because it has an obtuse angle here, and all 3 sides are different. So that means it's scalene obtuse or obtuse scalene, and it doesn't matter which order you put those adjectives, okay? Last one here. Ooh, well, this tells me it's a right triangle, right? Right? Yeah, so it's a right triangle, and it has 2 congruent sides, okay? So those 2 congruent sides make it isosceles. So an isosceles right triangle, or a right isosceles triangle. And that's all there is to classification of triangles. Next video we start with some theorems. Yay!